Just to reiterate for all the kids at home, this isn't a character flaw. Nothing's broken about you. This is just a pattern in your brain. And the wonderful thing about that is brain patterns can be interrupted. They can be first interrupted and then eventually rewired. Well, thank you for sharing. There's a few neuroscience realities to what you just talked through, and I'm going to break those down. I think it's such a perfect setup for us. A few things for viewers to listen to here. The first thing is you didn't explicitly say this, but let me know if this isn't accurate. You felt like it was a lot, or you felt that it was overwhelming to even get into the overwhelm work the second time around.
Yeah, exactly.
In your message to me, you said sitting down for 30 minutes seems like way too much, right?
Yeah.
So that's the first thing we'll talk about. Second one is the resistance to actually sitting down and why that's difficult at times. And then the third one is going to be talking about shame spiral off of these things. We talk about shame separately in other areas, but I think it's really relevant here to kind of loop it in so that people understand, when you do go into a shame spiral off of these kinds of failures, just because you're not doing what you set out to do. We call it, you're not doing what you set out to do. There's failure in that. Then you have this secondary spiral that happens with shame. Why does that happen? And more importantly, what can you kind of do about it when you find that that's coming up for you? So there's our little preview. I will share my screen. Okay, momentum method part 2. So really going to talk about, again, what some of the wiring that's going on in your brain and why you specifically were having some of the experiences that you were. And then, of course, we're going to get practical. A lot of things are repeated. They're techniques from the course, but just going to reiterate things you can do to get some progress. I think one really big piece that Hayden talked about, and I would like to figure out a better way to do this in the course, is how much these things overlap with each other. For example, overwhelm really closely linked to perfectionism, right? So overwhelm and the idea that things need to be at a certain standard, they're very hand in hand. And so often the things for Hayden, I would say, the things that helped him with perfectionism really also carried over into overwhelm and getting traction there. Feel free to jump in and correct me if we're off base, Hayden. All right. So here's the pattern, what typically happens with ADHD. So you know what to do. You sat down with me, you've gone through the course, you've gone through whatever, you have the system, the tasks are clear, and you're not confused about what to execute on. But you have this resistance to starting, right? So everything feels equally urgent. Both of you guys have shared with me before. It's difficult for me to use the Eisenhower at times because I can't actually determine what's urgent or what's important. So we're going to talk about that. And then often the labeling that happens with that, I'm lazy, I'm a failure, et cetera, et cetera. So then at that point, when you can't start, then you try harder. So it's a lot more effort, it's a lot more pressure, often a lot more systems, more work, whatever. But that also doesn't seem to move the needle. And then inevitably, it's going to get to this place of okay, I put all this extra effort in, I'm not seeing the movement. Now you have all the narratives that come in. So then you blame yourself. You tell yourself that you're not disciplined enough, you're broken, et cetera, et cetera. Feeling familiar? I've lived this for years. So just to reiterate for all the kids at home, this isn't a character flaw. Nothing's broken about you. This is just a pattern in your brain. And the wonderful thing about that is brain patterns can be interrupted. They can be first interrupted and then eventually rewired. So the reason why I go to biology so much for this kind of stuff is not to make more neurotypical. This would be very relevant to most neurotypical people. But if we can understand that there's a biological reality behind what we're experiencing, that will help us correctly assign blame, first of all. And then second, understand where we have agency to actually change what's going on in our heads. Okay, so shame spiral. We'll just hit this real quickly, but something like you miss deadlines, you hear from yourself when you add in the narratives. So each failure kind of adds to this layer of shame, and then you start avoiding things to avoid more failure. And that's a little bit of what you were talking about, Steph. Loop repeats, loop builds. So the thing that I want to talk about is you talked about, Steph, you were correct when you said, I feel like I'm using overwhelm as a shield. That's exactly what overwhelm is. It is a shield. It is a protection mechanism to protect your state of being, right? And so if we talk about the different mechanisms or the different things that your brain will try to do, this is kind of how they're going to come together. So your brain wants to protect and it wants to avoid costs. So when those two things come together, that's overwhelm. So overwhelm decreases your costs because you typically step back from everything. And it also protects your state of being because you don't have to engage with those things. Protection, staying safe, very similar. But just wanted to show there's a few basic drives in your brain, and when they come together, that's often why it uses overwhelm. It's very effective at keeping you away from the things that feel dangerous. So it keeps you away from making decisions. Decisions often feel dangerous. It feels safer than risking doing something else wrong and adding more shame. Paralysis feels a lot safer than additional failure, additional shame. And just to reiterate, in reality, that's the opposite of what's going to serve us, right? In reality, that paralysis is almost never going to leave us in a worse position than if we just would have gone out and swung and maybe got it 70% correct, right? So again, we're starting to think about this as like an emotional management thing. It's not an organizational problem. It's not a you need a better systems problem, although those things can help. Why do things feel difficult to pay attention to? Why does it feel difficult to engage with this? So understanding why your brain gets stuck is the first step of working with it instead of working against it. So we've talked about this before, but the big four with ADHD brains. So is it interesting? Is it novel? Is it urgent? And is it challenging? And actually, I would say interesting is okay, but what I would actually swap that out for is dangerous. So is it dangerous? Is there some sort of stakes? Steph, for your example, when you said it's difficult and it feels unproductive for me to sit down and brain dump for 30 minutes versus getting things done, I want you to understand that that's your brain that does that, right? That's your brain that's assigning that importance. And what it's doing is an ADHD brain is wired for where's the immediate threat now. So when you have a long list of things to get done, it feels like you're moving away from what's important because, again, this is what's important to your brain, right? It feels like you're moving away from what's important to do something that's not yet relevant because brain dumping isn't for a now problem. It's for a down the road problem. So just understand that your brain will almost always just have this disposition to handle whatever it is that's in front of you, which is why people with ADHD have a lot of compulsive based behaviors. So just understand, again, it's the way your brain is built, and we're going to work with that. We're going to understand that, and then we're going to build systems to help with that. Contrasted with neurotypical brains, wouldn't this be nice? They run on importance. So if it matters, they can typically do it. That's such a foreign concept to me.
I was going to say, how?
It's like we can't even register it because I've never experienced that. There's plenty of important things that just don't feel important at all to my brain, and I have kicked down the road for a long, long time. Historically in business, taxes were not good. Deadlines. So deadlines register as real threats early. People have priority hierarchies. Those feel natural. And then when they get into low stimulation, they actually can function in low stimulation, right? So it's like quiet room, nice mellow, everything. Like that's often a good state for focus for a lot of people. Depending on where you're at with ADHD and your journey with ADHD, that may or may not be what's productive for you. Okay, so for ADHD, remember, again, dopamine is that fuel for our brains, and we have less of it to start our days, and we use more of it when we do anything with our brains. So what that's going to mean is we feel like this complete lack of stimulation oftentimes when we sit down to do desk work because it doesn't have any of the things that are interesting to us, and we don't have dopamine to kind of like lubricate all the gears in our head. So then your prefrontal cortex kind of shuts down at that point when it's not getting its dopamine. The dopamine detox is so helpful because it helps kind of reset that baseline level of like, here's the amount of dopamine that you need. And so when you can kind of adjust that, it allows your prefrontal cortex to kind of run on that level of dopamine, right? In other words, can function. Overwhelm is like the extreme of this, right? So everything feels urgent. So it dials up the dopamine and urgency of everything. Nothing feels interesting. So that's like the exact conditions for your brain to go, cool, well, I'm in a sea of everything the same, so I might as well do nothing. Because how would I know which direction to move in? So it's this kind of like your brain is using the victim mentality against your will or without your permission, essentially. So again, just to reiterate, this is all you can see from a neuroscience perspective, how your brain gets to this point, right? How it creates this like washed out state where how could you move forward with anything, right? Which is what it wants because now it's safe. This making sense so far? Anybody have any questions? I know I covered some of these quickly, but I know a lot of this is repeat stuff. So,
Yep, good.
I really like talking about this part. So here's kind of the 4 ways that procrastination is going to show up for pretty much anyone. So you're going to have overwhelm paralysis. This is just where your brain is going to make everything feel like everything's the same. And then the natural state is paralysis. Dopamine deficit is almost the complete opposite, but it often goes hand in hand with this. So this is like You just feel so flat, so unmotivated, so bored by everything that you're just like not really interested in doing anything. So again, they're kind of like opposites, but also the same, which is the weird part. So because you don't feel motivated or interested by anything, you also don't really want to do anything. And also it's just difficult to do things. It's a kind of another form of paralysis. Steph, did you have something?
I wasn't going to say anything, but like out of these, like right now, I'm definitely in the overwhelm paralysis.
Yeah.
I'm definitely at that stage right now. In the past, typically like the dopamine deficit, that really resonates because I just get bored really easy. And perfectionism loop in the past has been a thing, but not as much anymore. And time blindness, that doesn't resonate with me personally.
So I would say the same for me. For me, dopamine deficit is what hits me the hardest. Historically, overwhelm paralysis was huge when I wasn't quite, I would say, as emotionally in as good of a place. Perfectionism loop and time blindness both don't really hit me as much. Time blindness a little bit, but that's just because I prefer to have deadlines. Like I prefer to have urgency to move on things. And if I don't have urgency, then like it's not as interesting for me. So kind of like the dopamine deficit. But I don't have actual time blindness. Like I don't have difficulty perceiving that. A lot of people with ADHD do. They have difficulty perceiving like the amount of time something will take. Like driving time to places is very common.
I was just going to say with the time blindness, like I don't have issues perceiving time, but like in the past, like say for example, when I was a student and I would literally leave like long papers till the day before to work on them, I would end up getting like an A on it. And then if I didn't do that, if I like worked on it for a long period of time leading up to it and didn't leave it to the last minute, I would end up getting like a much worse mark. So my pattern became just leave it to the last minute and it'll go well.
Your reality.
Yeah.
This is why people with ADHD often say like, oh yeah, I have ADHD and it's fine. I just work best in high pressure situations, right? There's something that's suffering almost always, but it's very easy to get used to the pattern of I have better performance in this state. Therefore everything's fine. I'll just put myself in those conditions all the time, right? But the thing is, then you're dependent on those conditions to regulate and to be functional. A lot of this is rehashing, but just again, it's important to understand the difference between your systems not serving you and your systems not like supporting you and giving you what you need, and you being a failure personally. And these can often feel the same because a lot of times with the people I help, typically high performing, typically a lot of their identity is attached to their performance, but everyone's at some stage in the process. So just a reminder that when things are not clicking, the more you can think about that is, okay, I don't have the support that I need to execute consistently, and make it less about your character, who you are as a person. Easier to fix the problem, easier to move forward. Okay. So why shame kind of happens, what it does, and how we can kind of move out of it. So shame works on your amygdala. When the amygdala activates, that's when that adult part of your brain, the prefrontal cortex, actually shuts down. What will paralyze you will make you feel like you can't do anything. So we talked about the initial shutting down of your prefrontal cortex, not enough dopamine. You create this washed out state where everything feels urgent. That also lets the PFC not function. But then if you attach shame to that, so like I'm a failure, I don't want to look in the mirror, I can't handle this, then you actually have additional neuroscience that's shutting down your brain, driving you deeper into the protective state, further kind of reinforcing the state that doesn't serve us or that we don't love, right? So just kind of moving and adding curiosity to the process is how you can help move away from this. So we practice this a lot, right? It's like, how can we experience emotion? How can we experience a state that's uncomfortable and then add distance? So instead of like, I'm a failure, this is me that's broken. How can I say, interesting? Like, this is what happened. The 30-minute written brain dump is causing some friction. What do I do from here? What's the experiment? What can I move forward with? Right? So again, curiosity, just the more you can observe yourself with curiosity, stillness is really the key to this, the easier it's going to be to break that shame loop. Okay. So practical stuff, 3 parts to kind of resetting this and starting to move towards self-compassion. So naming the emotion that's coming up, labeling it, understanding that you're part of a broader community that has the same experience, which is part of what we try to do here. So you're not uniquely broken. A lot of People, particularly people with ADHD and who are in business, feel the exact same way. That will help with the shame. Shame often likes to tell you that you are uniquely fucked up, right? Well, just looking at yourself like you looked at someone else you love who's in your life, right? Just loving yourself, giving yourself that kindness. Again, it sounds woo-woo, but this is how we break the shame pattern, which again has a neurochemical reaction in your brain. So we're trying to access our PFC to get adult things done. This is an important part of getting back to that place. If you're in shame, that whole part of the brain is going to be suppressed because your amygdala is activated. So again, we're not trying to pamper ourselves here, not trying to feel amazing. It's just to get that part of your brain functioning so that you can be an adult again and get some things done. Plus, you'll enjoy your life a lot more. So I will talk about the brain dump, but I'm going to talk about like a minimum viable action version of the brain dump. If the brain dump ever feels like a lot, what I would just encourage is like for every practice that we have a minimum viable action for it. So for the brain dump, this is how you can do the whole thing in like 7 minutes. It says 10 minutes, but whole point is like, it takes you 2 minutes to sit down and set up, takes you 5 minutes to go through everything that happened, but you could dump everything for like 90 seconds and it would still work. So the point is you can take everything that we do, you can shrink it down to the minimum viable action, and that will be the version that helps you get past a lot of times whatever state is making you feel like low energy or like you can't do anything. There's very rarely a time where you can't shrink it down enough that you can take at least a tiny step, like going to the gym and doing 5 push-ups.
Not to interrupt, but I think on this, one piece that has helped me, I always, for some reason, attach timelines to everything. I'm trying to have the fastest, whatever. And so, but then I don't get it done in that time as good as I want it to be. Then it's like a total piece of crap.
Yeah.
For me, getting rid of, I'm going to sit down, I'm going to do this task, and it's going to take me this long because I just think it might, has been helpful. And so we'll still do a time block. It's like, this is how much time I have to spend on it in this moment. But then I've given myself not until the day before so that I can spend extra time on it later if I need to.
Yeah.
That's been a real big game changer for me. So just wanted to share that in case Stephanie. So getting rid of that was big.
Yeah.
Well,
thank you for sharing that. I think an important piece of the time part is just so that you can't tell yourself stories about how large something's going to be, right? So if you feel like something's going to be a massive task, saying like, okay, I can do anything for 3 minutes. I can do anything for 5 minutes. That's the intention of doing this. And then of course, if you have time blocked off, you can let these things expand. If you're in your happy place and you're jiving, like you can let them expand naturally. Yeah.
So I think my issue with that is that, like, my thought process with that is when I think to myself, use the push-up example, okay, well, maybe I'll just do 5 push-ups. What I start thinking is like, well, that's not going to make any difference. And I just kind of downplay the importance of that consistency or how much it's actually going to help get me towards the goal. And yeah, so that's kind of where, for me, like, okay, 7 minutes of doing this is like, can I do it? Yeah. Is it going to help? Like, I mean, I know it will help, but in my head, like, I would just be like, yeah, that's not going to do anything.
And if you had to label that resistance pattern, what would you label it with?
I mean, I'm avoiding doing it, but beyond that, I'm not sure.
It's binary thinking, right? So it's saying if something doesn't give me meaningful progress, who's defining meaningful, by the way? You, completely subjective. If something doesn't give me meaningful progress, then it's better to just not do it. And then I can reallocate that time.
Yeah.
True.
Yeah, that's what I think.
Okay, so let's take the gym example. What is really being built in the gym example? If we were going to argue for why it is helpful, what is being built?
Discipline.
Okay, maybe say it a different way in more neuroscience perspective.
The neural pathways in your brain for that system or what you want to accomplish.
Yeah. Like maybe physically you're not radically changing your body with 5 push-ups, but what anyone would agree with is that you are building a pathway of going to the gym and working out. True?
Mm-hmm.
So when you do that, you are basically building into your identity that you are a person who goes to the gym and works out. In the same way, any of these practices that you do, you're building the idea that when I feel dysregulated, I have tools that I try as experiments. So it doesn't even matter if the tool itself works, because I'm the kind of person who's going to keep experimenting until I get myself out of this state. That's what we're building. Does that make sense?
Mhm.
Same idea. Right? So like anything that's prioritizing, okay, I'm willing to like engage in the process, even if I can't see the results, what we're doing is we're building those neural pathways. And the big thing that I would push on is like, who are you to say what's significant or not? How do you know that? Right? So I'm not saying this will magically resolve the resistance. Like it will still be there. But for some of these things, if you can understand why they're showing up, in this case, it's binary thinking, which is a super common avoidance pattern, particularly with ADHD. Because ADHD wants big, sexy things, right? Like it's so much easier for me to do, what's the name of it? I'm spacing that workout challenge, right? 75 hard. So much easier for me to do 75 hard than like go to the gym 3 times a week, right? That's not true for most people. Like most people tap out on 75 hard, but it's got all the things that like light up my brain. Like it's challenging. It has stakes because you post on social media. So like if I fail, there's danger there. It's new. Like I'm not doing 75 hard all the time. So when I'm doing it, it feels novel, right? So, and like it's this extreme thing. So like that's perfectly wired to get me moving on it. Whereas like it takes a lot of mental whatever for me to get down the road and go to the gym when it's like mundane and boring and it's maybe not that challenging or whatever, right? I've done it 3 times now. Each time I'm like, this is so much easier for me than going to the gym and doing the normal boring workout. Anyway, part of that is just understanding some things are going to be easier for your brain, and the small, not sexy progress things that we often are how we change our brain wiring, they're not going to feel significant. And you can kind of expect that, right? Okay. So let me see what the gist of this is. This is like the breaking down the brain dump. So you're going to have like the obvious things that come up, the deeper worries and fears, and then you'll ultimately, if you do it enough times and for long enough, you'll get to the real stuff that's holding you back. Yeah, that's all good. Here, you can just go back and read this later if you know what ADHD type you are. A lot of this stuff is going to be at times or in certain circumstances. None of it's going to be like all the time, right? Just a reminder for everybody. So if you have the hyperactive side to things, a huge piece, and we talked about this, is like the sitting down will in and of itself be resistance, right? That can trigger resistance. So if that's the case, like just walk around and talk. Run a voice note, talk while you're on a walk, or talk while you're throwing a tennis ball against a wall, right? So for anybody who has that hyperactive side, huge hack to do this while you're moving around a little bit, and it will feel like way less resistance. Okay, the reset. So this is a little bit more of the practical stuff. So again, similar to the shame, starting with just acknowledging it. So, hey, I'm feeling overwhelmed coming up right now. I would change the wording here. It says I am overwhelmed. I would say like I'm experiencing overwhelm or I'm feeling overwhelmed right now. And then create that space. This is super important because like wherever you are when you feel it, you will attach some level of attachment to. So if you can go to a separate place, like if you're working in your office, you can go outside, you can go downstairs, very helpful. And then just do something that's going to put you in a different physical state. So breath work is great for this. Moving your body is great for this. Cold water, like cold showers, very good.
Great.
Yeah, no one likes cold water, but there's so much neuroscience behind the resetting ability of the cold water. Pretty cool. Yeah. So I really like breath work. I think breath work is probably the easiest, lowest friction way to kind of just reset where you're at mentally and physically at the same time. Okay. So sometimes you will break through overwhelm and you still won't move. And you just still kind of feel stuck or not moving. So I want to reinforce that like clarity isn't enough when sometimes you need other things to get moving. So here's a few kind of tools where you can kind of get some things moving. So that 2-minute rule. So like if something can take less than 2 minutes, doing it now. I use this all the time. Very helpful. Same thing we were just talking about for bigger stuff. You can also just do 2 minutes of starting, and that helps build those paths. Focus on the starting, right? The starting is often where the resistance is. And don't judge yourself. Don't do anything about the finishing. The finishing is not important at this stage. And then MVA is also one that I use all the time. MVA is the cure to a lot of the binary thinking. right? Or overwhelm, like overwhelm on a case by case basis with one thing. Like that feels like so much. It's like, cool. What's the minimum viable action that would move me forward in some way? And it doesn't even have to be like crazy. Like look at their examples here. Finding a pen is your MVA on figuring out your priorities. Open a blank document for write the proposal, or get Notion AI to write your first draft, right? Plan the project, write 3 words, right? MVA just functions on that. A lot of the resistance is going to be on starting. What's the minimum you can do? And even if you don't go past that, again, you're rebuilding those pathways. Okay. Body doubling, we've talked about this before. Very helpful if you consistently find resistance, particularly to admin work. I won't spend a lot of time on this, but there's a ton of neuroscience behind why body doubling can be helpful. I like this just as a way of showing how these things can show up. So overwhelm, kind of too many inputs, total shutdown, can't pick anything. Brain dump is helpful for that. Dopamine deficit, that 2-minute rule, that MBA. I would also say resetting your state in the dopamine deficit. Like if you're feeling just dead and demotivated, great idea to go outside, get a walk in, get your body moving, maybe have a snack, like something that's going to just get some dopamine into your brain in a natural, good way can really help. Perfectionism loop, that 70% rule, 85% rule, just lowering the bar on what you need to do and just having a rule that like, when I'm blocking this because of perfection, I just drop the bar and I just do it. Like for me, 85% is all that needed for something to go out the door. I can always fix it later. Time blindness, those visual, like tangible timers are great for people. Body doubling is also very helpful. Okay, homework, pick any 2. I would say just pick even one of these and do them for the next week, 2 weeks, if overwhelm's coming up for you. So do a brain dump, 5-10 minutes is all that you need for that. It doesn't even have to be their full 10-minute version. 5 minutes of a messy brain dump, totally fine. Use that reset protocol. So pick something that you like or you feel is going to work for you. Look into breath work, look into a breath work pattern that you can learn and just do when you're feeling overwhelmed. And MBA is something that I would do all the time. Like if it's less than 2 minutes, knock it out. If it's bigger than 2 minutes, what's a small step that you can do? So just to reiterate, like these are all tools, these are all things that are helpful, but again, doing the work on the emotional side to help manage your emotions better, manage your emotions more in a way that serves you is really what's going to help long-term with overwhelm. So we can get the quick wins, we can get the small wins, but bringing yourself out of shame and then doing the work. So emotionally, you're not running away from the state that you felt originally, the state that you're shielding from. That is ultimately what's going to help you get out of overwhelm.